Hello and welcome to this podcast where we are going to discuss the rivalry between the Australian and the New Zealand rugby teams. Now, I've split this podcast into two parts. Part 1 will be me giving you some general information about the countries, the sport and the teams. The part 2 will be me alongside my partner discussing our thesis statement. Now, first, let's start off with Australia. Now, Australia is the biggest country in Oceania with a total area of 7.7 million square kilometers. Its capital is also Canberra, not Sydney as many believe. As of 2016, Australia had a total population of 23.4 million people. Now, New Zealand, on the other hand, only has a total population of 4.8 million people. It's also the second biggest country in Oceania, but only with a total area of 268,012 square kilometers. The capital of New Zealand is Wellington. Now, combined, the two countries will have about 29 million people. They were both also colonized by the British, which gave them the common monarch. As of today, they still actually have Queen Elizabeth II as the monarch. Both countries are also located in Oceania, which is a continent southeast on the map. Now, over to our topic. The topic we have chosen is sport and or culture. This is because we both are very interested in sport, however not specifically rugby, and we thought that this would be a fun and easier experience for us. Now over to the thesis statement. The thesis statement we have chosen are: how has rivalry between the Australian and the New Zealand rugby teams affected their culture? Now, in order to understand this thesis statement, you have to understand two things first. How and what is rugby? And who are the teams? Now, first off, we'll start with rugby. Rugby have two different types. You have union rugby and you have league rugby. Now, both our national teams play union rugby, which means that we don't have to focus on league rugby. We will instead focus on union rugby. Now, over to some general information about rugby. It's reported that rugby, or the idea of rugby, originated in the 18th century in England. Now, this was reported actually rugby originated from an incident during a football match, where a player named William Webb Ellis just suddenly stopped, picked up the ball in his hands and started running towards the opposition field. Now, the rugby as we know it today have a very specific rule set. It's played by two teams with 15 players each on a rectangular field that is 100 times 70 meters long. On each short side there are two H-shaped goals like this. A rugby match lasts about 2 halves of 40 minutes each, with some additional times. That means that if you put the both half together, you will get 80 minutes. In order to win a rugby match, you have to have the most points. In order to get points, you have 3 options. You can score a try, you can score a conversion kick, or you can score a penalty. Now, a try is worth 5 points. In order to score a try, you have to run with the ball behind the opposition goal and put it down without being tackled. Now, if you get a try, you will then have the chance for a conversion kick. A conversion kick is worth an additional 2 points. And to score a conversion kick, you place the ball on a place where decided by the referee. You have to kick the ball from that place between the U form of the H goal. Now, if you manage this, you will then have a combined 7 points. And third, you have a penalty. A penalty is just the same as a conversion kick, only you don't get it after a try. To get a penalty, you have to be fouled by an opposition player, and if you score a penalty, it's not worth 2 points, it's worth 3. Now, over to the teams. The teams we have chosen are the New Zealand All Blacks and the Australian Wallabies. Now, first with the All Blacks. The All Blacks is of course the national team of New Zealand. And the first international debut were on the 15th of August 1903 against Australia of all the countries. Now, that game resulted in a 22-3 victory to New Zealand, which kind of answered our thesis statement a little bit from the start. Now, their kit is pretty self-explanatory, all black, except for a silver fern on their chest. They are, as of today, the number one rugby team in the world according to the ranking from the World Rugby Association. Now, this is problematic for Australia because Australia is only number 3 in the world according to this ranking, behind New Zealand and England. But the first match were against the British Isles on the 24th of June 1899. It resulted in a 13-3 victory to Australia, which means that both teams won their international debut, which is a positive thing. Now, their kit is not self-explanatory as the New Zealand kit. The kit of the Australians are yellow and green. They have a yellow t-shirt and a green short. They also have a kangaroo as their logo on their right side of the chest, not left. Now, that concludes part 1 of our podcast, and we will join you shortly with part 2. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of this podcast. Now we move on to our discussion. So, let's start off. Bull, what does the rivalry mean for your country?
The rivalry mean for New Zealand is very important because it's very important for the New Zealanders to be better than Australia in something. So to be better than Australia in rugby means much to both the players and citizens of New Zealand.
Yes, it also means a lot to Australia because the teams, as you know, is very different in playing style, and it's of course the second biggest sport in Australia. Now, before games in both Australia and New Zealand, there are a lot of trash talking in the media. There are rude words going on across the teams, and it builds up very much excitement. Now, I want to compare this to the rivalry between Norway and Sweden on skis. Now, in Norway and Sweden, we know that we are the best on skis. We, without a doubt, for men's and women, we are the best. Now, even though we are the best and we regularly win, we don't ever want to see Sweden win. So I would like to compare this to New Zealand versus Australia, because New Zealand is without a doubt the best team.
Yes.
Statistically, they are the best without a doubt. Now, they have also lost some time to Australia, which kind of sucks for them, because they want to be the best, and if they lose, they're not. So, moving on to the next point. What do you do? So what do your supporters do, of your team do, before and after and under the game?
The supporters, were usually, as they do in football in England, they go out to pubs or bars to have some drinks before the match. And during the match, they often join in on the haka dance at the start, either if they're home or watching it from a pub or on the stadium. So many of them are actually learn the haka dance to do it with them. And they also have made a song with the biggest artist from New Zealand that is supposed to help them bring the victory home.
Yes, of course, you talk about the haka dance. Can you please explain a little bit further what the haka dance is?
The haka dance is a dance that the tribal or the indigenous people from New Zealand did when they went to war, just to try to scare the opponents. So that's New Zealand thought behind it. So they do the haka dance to scare the other teams before the match.
Yes, haka dance is very important for their culture, for their heritage. But in Australia, They also are very common to meet at a bar. The supporters, they drink some beers, have some fun, meet some friends, families, and you can see before a match or during a match, you can still have yellow and green because that's the national colors of Australia and the rugby team. And I guess also you see a lot of black in New Zealand. But it couldn't be a good rivalry without some scandals now, could it?
No,
So, what scandals have you found?
a scandal I found was when I don't remember quite what it was, but it was under the Bloody Soul Cup. There was New Zealand and Australia was going to have a match in Sydney, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
And before the New Zealanders came, the Australians had bugged the room, so they have put the microphones throughout the room to hear their tactics and the way they were going to do the match.
Yes, I've also seen this article. However, it wasn't. I don't think it actually was the Australians. It was alleged that it was Australians. It possibly was the Australians. But yes, their conference room in their hotel was actually bugged. They found a mic under a stool or a chair in their conference room, and this caused massive outrage. It was terrible for Australia's what you call integrity or proudness. But another sex scandal involving New Zealand actually was when Jerome Kaino was sent home after they found out he was having an affair in Australia. So this was during the 2017 Rugby Championships, and he is a happily married man, or he says he is at least. He has 2 children and are happily married. Now, during this stay in Australia during the 2017 Rugby Championship, a newspaper actually reported that he was having an affair with an Australian woman. Now this caused so much outrage that the New Zealand team just had to send him home. Now that is something very big because Jerome Kaino is big part of the New Zealand All Blacks.
Mm-hmm.
But who is the best? Who is best statistically? Who's best?
Statistically, the All Blacks is the best because they have won 122 matches out of 185. So that says like how much better the All Black is than the Wallabies.
Yes,
and plus the All Blacks won the last match between them.
That's correct. But however, I have got some statistic here that shows that during the professional era, they have played 161 matches. The All Blacks have won 111 of them. Now, this means that they have a win percentage of 69%. The Wallabies only won 43 matches, will give them a winning percent of about 31, I believe. Yes. No, I mean 27, because they have drawn 7 times, which is the remaining 4%. Now, the total points, not goals, but points during all these matches are New Zealand have 3,375, Australia has 2,273. Now this gives New Zealand a positive point score if you divide the two by 1,102 points. But actually, the last match when I was gathering the data was actually victorious to Australia, which was a training match though. So to sum up this podcast, we believe that the rivalry between the two teams are very important for their culture because there's a part of the regular routine for people. I go to the pub, have some beers, meet some friends, socialize. This means a lot to people, and seeing your country win a game like this over your neighbors, it's very important. So that concludes this podcast, and see you next time.